The woods behind Hawthorne Creek weren't wild in the dramatic sense. They were the kind of woods locals treated like an extension of town. Deer trails turned into jogging paths, fallen logs that kids dared each other to climb, a creek that everyone pretended wasn't cold until they stepped in. Ben Hollis had walked those trails since he was a kid. At 31, Ben was the guy who still did the same loop after work, earbuds in, head clearing, boots hitting dirt at a steady rhythm. He worked maintenance for the school district, fixing broken locks, replacing ceiling tiles, hauling supplies. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and lately, he needed stable. 2 months earlier, Ben's dog Maple, a golden mix with a goofy grin, had slipped her collar one evening and vanished into the woods during a thunderstorm. Ben had searched until his leg shook. He'd posted flyers, he'd called shelters, he'd walked the trails with treats in his pockets, whispering her name like saying it enough times might pull her back out of the trees. Nothing. People in town stopped him to say the same things. "I'm so sorry. Maybe she got picked up." "Don't give up." Ben nodded, thanked them, went home, and stared at Maple's empty bed. That Saturday, after another week of no news, Ben forced himself outside anyway. It was either walk or drown in his own thoughts. The air was cold, the sky pale. Leaves covered the trail in a thick, crunchy layer. Ben followed the creek path deeper than he usually did, toward an area most people skipped because it was steeper and the phone signal died. He wasn't looking for Maple anymore, not consciously, but grief has a way of steering your feet. Half an hour in, Ben stepped off the main trail to take a shortcut, one he'd used since he was 12. It cut through a narrow stand of pines and rejoined the path near an old logging road. He was halfway through when something caught on his boot. Ben stumbled, looked down, and saw a strip of leather half buried in the damp leaves. At first, he thought it was trash. Then he saw the buckle. A collar. Old, cracked, stained dark with mud. Ben's pulse jumped. He dropped to a knee and brushed leaves away with shaking fingers. The leather was worn, but the metal ring was intact. There was a small tag attached, scratched, dirty. Ben swallowed hard and turned it over. His breath hitched. It wasn't Maple's bright red collar. This one was brown. But the tag had a name on it. Rosie, under it, an address. Not Ben's. Someone in Hawthorne Creek. Ben stared, heart pounding. He felt that strange cold mix of hope and dread, the feeling that a simple object had just turned into a door, and he didn't know what was behind it, because people didn't just lose collars in the deep woods. Not like this. Ben stood slowly, scanning the trees. The woods were quiet except for wind and the creek's faint rush. Then he noticed something else. A faint line in the leaves, like something had been dragged. Not a path, not a deer trail. A scuffed, uneven streak leading off to the right, away from the creek, into thicker brush. Ben's throat tightened. The collar hadn't just been dropped. It looked like it had been pulled through here. Ben's first instinct was to turn back. To take the collar to someone, maybe the address on the tag. Let it be someone else's problem. But the drag mark pulled at him like gravity. Ben held the collar in his hand and followed the scuffed line. The brush thickened. Branches snagged his jacket. The ground dipped and rose, damp under leaves. And then Ben saw something that made his stomach drop. A second item. A torn piece of nylon leash, faded blue, tangled around a sapling. Ben's hands went cold. Because now this wasn't a random collar. This was evidence. Someone's pet had been out here, struggling. Ben's heart hammered as he pushed deeper, following the broken leash, the disturbed leaves, the faint signs of a trail no one meant to leave behind. Then the woods opened into a small clearing, and in the center of it was something Ben never expected to see. A makeshift shelter. Not a tent, more like a low lean-to made of branches and tarp, tucked between fallen logs so it blended with the forest floor. Ben froze. His breath went shallow. Because if someone was living out here, he was trespassing into something he didn't understand. He took a slow step forward, and from inside the shelter came a sound. A low, frightened growl. Ben's pulse spiked. He backed up half a step, hands raised, collar still in his grip. "Hey," he whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." The growl stopped. Then, slowly, a shape moved in the shadow. 2 eyes caught the dim light. Not human eyes, animal eyes. A dog, thin, matted, eyes wide, peeked out from under the tarp. Ben's chest tightened so hard it hurt, because the dog's fur was a familiar shade of gold, and around its neck was the faint outline of a collar mark. Ben's mouth went dry. "Maple," he whispered. The dog's ears twitched. It didn't run, it didn't bark, it just stared at Ben like it was trying to decide whether hope was safe. And in that moment, Ben realized this wasn't going to be a private, quiet discovery. Whatever was happening out here, whatever this shelter meant, was about to explode into the kind of story a whole town couldn't stop talking about. Ben didn't rush. Every cell in his body screamed at him to lunge forward, grab Maple, pull her into his arms, and never let go. But the dog in the shelter wasn't wagging. She wasn't bouncing. She looked like a creature who'd learned that sudden movements meant danger. Ben swallowed hard and lowered himself slowly to a crouch a few feet away. "Maple," he whispered again, softer. "It's me." The dog's head tilted slightly. Recognition flickered. Just a spark, but it wasn't pure joy. It was fear fighting hope. Ben reached into his jacket pocket with slow, careful movements and pulled out the treats he always carried on walks, more out of habit than expectation. He set one treat on the ground and slid it forward gently. Maple stared at it. Then she stared at Ben. Ben held still, barely breathing. After a long moment, Maple crawled forward an inch, belly low, shoulders tense. She sniffed the air, then snapped the treat up and retreated instantly under the tarp. Ben's throat tightened with relief so sharp it hurt. "Okay," he whispered. "You're alive." Behind Maple, the shelter shifted again. Another pair of eyes appeared, not Maple's, smaller, darker. A second dog. Ben's stomach dropped. Then another movement, something quick and low. A third dog. Ben sat frozen, heart pounding. 3 dogs, huddled together in a hidden shelter in the woods. And now the collar in Ben's hand, Rosie, made horrifying sense. This wasn't just Maple surviving. This was Maple surviving with other lost pets. Ben's mind raced. Had they found each other, formed a pack, been abandoned together, or had someone kept them here? Ben's gaze flicked around the clearing. He noticed things he'd missed at first. Empty food cans, a plastic jug, a torn blanket. Evidence that someone had been feeding them, not regularly, nothing looked fresh, but enough to keep them alive. Ben's skin prickled. People didn't just accidentally build shelters for lost dogs in the woods. Ben's phone had no service. He checked anyway, one bar that disappeared instantly. He couldn't call. He couldn't leave, not without marking the spot, because he might never find it again. But he also couldn't stay too long, if whoever had built this shelter came back. Ben looked at Maple again. Her eyes were locked on him now, trembling slightly. He made a decision. Ben pulled off his jacket slowly and laid it on the ground, then placed more treats on it, creating a safe target that smelled like him. "Come on," he whispered. "It's okay." Maple crept forward again, and this time she stepped onto the jacket, sniffing it, eyes wide. Ben held out his hand, palm down. Maple hesitated. Then she leaned in, just a fraction, and touched her nose to his fingers. Ben's eyes stung. He didn't grab, he didn't move. He let her choose. Maple exhaled a shaky breath and stayed there. That's when Ben heard footsteps. Not animal, human. Crunching leaves. Ben's blood turned ice. He snapped his head toward the sound. Through the trees, a figure appeared. A man, older, wearing a camouflage jacket, carrying a plastic bag. Ben's pulse hammered. The man froze when he saw Ben in the clearing. For one long second, they just stared at each other. Then the man's eyes flicked to the dogs, and his face changed. Not surprise, anger. "What are you doing here?" the man barked. Ben stood slowly, keeping his body between the man and the dogs. His voice came out tight. "I could ask you the same thing. This is my dog." The man's jaw clenched. "Your dog? That dog's been running wild." Ben's hands curled into fists. "She went missing in a storm. I've been searching for 2 months. The man stepped closer, eyes hard. "Well, she's not missing anymore. She's mine now." Ben felt his stomach drop. "Excuse me?" The man pointed toward the dogs. They were starving. Nobody wanted them. "I fed them." Ben's voice rose. "You built a shelter in the woods." "So what?" the man snapped. "Better than the pound. Better than being put down." Ben stared at him, stunned. "You can't just keep people's pets." The man's eyes narrowed. "Watch me." Maple growled quietly behind Ben, body tense. The man shifted his bag, and Ben caught a glimpse of what was inside. Dog food, and something else. Thin rope. Ben's pulse spiked. This wasn't a kind old man rescuing strays. This was someone claiming them, owning them, keeping them hidden. Ben's voice went low, controlled. "What's your name?" The man hesitated, then sneered. "None of your business." Ben's mind raced. No service, no backup. 3 dogs, a stranger with rope. Ben forced his voice steady. "I'm taking my dog." The man stepped forward again, and his hand tightened on the rope. "Then you're not leaving," he said. And in that moment, Ben realized the story wasn't just about finding Maple. It was about what this man was doing out here, and how many animals might have disappeared into these woods without anyone ever knowing why. Ben didn't fight the man, not with his fists. He fought with his brain. He raised his hands slightly, backing a step as if he was conceding. "Okay," he said, voice calm. "I don't want trouble." The man's shoulders eased a fraction, convinced he'd won. Ben nodded toward the plastic bag. "You're feeding them. That's good. I'm not trying to take that away." The man's eyes stayed hard, but he paused. "Yeah." Ben swallowed, acting shaken. "Listen, I didn't know. I've been desperate. I thought she was dead." The man's gaze flicked to Maple, then back. "Well, she wasn't." Ben forced a small nod. "Can I at least get the collar, so I can show my family she's alive, that I found her?" He held up the old collar he'd found, the one labelled Rosie. The man's eyes narrowed at it. "Where'd you get that?" Ben kept his tone casual. "It was in the leaves. I thought it was Maple's at first." The man's face tightened, like he hadn't expected evidence to exist outside his shelter. "Give me that." He stepped forward, reaching, and Ben used the moment. He tossed the collar to the side, not at the man, but away, into the brush. The man's eyes snapped toward it instinctively. Ben moved at the same time, pivoting toward Maple. "Maple, come!" The command was the same one he'd used since she was a puppy. For a split second, Maple hesitated, fear still gripping her. Then her body made the choice. She lunged to Ben. Ben grabbed her scruff and harnessed her close, wrapping his arms around her chest like a seatbelt. The other 2 dogs surged behind her, panicked, barking. The man whirled back, furious, rope swinging. "Hey!" Ben ran. Not straight down the trail, he zigzagged through trees, knowing the woods better than the man did. Maple stumbled at first, weak from months of surviving, but Ben half-carried her, dragging her through leaves. Behind them the man shouted, crashing through brush. Ben's lungs burned. He aimed toward the creek path, where he knew joggers sometimes passed even with low signal. He needed witnesses. He burst out onto the main trail, nearly colliding with a woman walking her dog. She yelped. "Oh my!" Ben gasped. "Call 911. Man in the woods. Dogs!" Her eyes widened as she saw Maple, thin and terrified, and the panic on Ben's face. She fumbled for her phone. Another jogger stopped. "What's happening?" Ben didn't slow. He's keeping dogs in there! He's coming!" Behind Ben, the man emerged from the trees, face red with rage. When he saw other people, he stopped dead. Because suddenly, it wasn't just Ben. It was witnesses. The woman already had 911 on speaker, voice shaking, giving the location. The man's eyes darted, calculating, then he backed away into the brush. Gone. Ben collapsed to his knees with Maple, shaking. The woman crouched beside him, eyes wide. "Is that your dog?" Ben's voice broke. "She went missing 2 months ago." Maple pressed her face into Ben's chest and made a sound that wasn't a bark, more like a broken sigh. Police arrived within minutes, guided by the walkers. Ben gave them the location of the shelter, the man's description, the rope, the food, the other dogs still back there. Officers went in with animal control and found the lean-to, the empty cans, the makeshift bedding, and 2 frightened dogs huddled under the tarp. One had an old collar with the name Rosie ripped off. The other had no collar at all. That night, Hawthorne Creek exploded with talk. People shared missing pet posters from months back and realized patterns. Dogs who vanished near the woods, collars found later, sightings that never led anywhere. Local news showed blurry footage of animal control carrying trembling dogs out of the trees. People argued online, was the man trying to save animals or steal them? But when police searched his property days later, they found more collars, leashes, tags, a notebook of names, and the town stopped debating. Because it wasn't rescue, it was obsession, it was possession, and it had been hidden in plain sight, just far enough into the woods that nobody thought to look. Ben took Maple home that first night, wrapped in blankets, trembling but safe. She ate slowly, like she still expected food to disappear. She flinched at sudden sounds. She followed Ben from room to room as if she didn't trust the world to keep him. Ben sat on the floor with her head in his lap, crying quietly. Not because she was home, because she had survived something no dog should have to survive. And because an old collar in the leaves, someone else's collar, had led him to the truth. For weeks, people in Hawthorne Creek talked about it like it was a legend. The man who found a collar and uncovered a hidden shelter. The stray dogs in the woods. The rescuer who wasn't a rescuer at all. But Ben didn't think of it like a town story. He thought of it as a thin strip of leather that could have been ignored. A clue that only mattered because someone finally bent down, picked it up, and refused to walk away.